Welcome to A Slice with Dice, a podcast exploring the ideas, pressures, and possibilities shaping how we learn, lead, and grow. I'm Corey Alderdice. For over 20 years, my work has lived at the intersection of gifted education, leadership development, and school culture, supporting students as they find their strengths, educators as they stretch their thinking, and schools as they build pathways that expand opportunity. Ready to dive in? Here's this week's Slice. As we move through the past year, there was a word that kept surfacing in conversations about leadership, institutions, and the future. Sometimes explicitly, sometimes just beneath the surface. That word is abundance. It shows up in policy debates, in essays about systems and governance, and increasingly in conversations among people who lead organizations that feel stretched thin. And what's interesting is that abundance is rising in influence at a moment when very little actually feels abundant. Time doesn't. Energy doesn't. Patience certainly doesn't, which is exactly why the word matters. Abundance, as it's being used right now, isn't inspirational fluff. It's not a motivational slogan meant to paper over real constraints. It's a reaction to a growing sense that our systems, especially public institutions like schools, are better at managing limitations than enabling growth. Now, the influence of the term in 2025 reflects a deeper discomfort. We know we are capable of more than our structures seem to allow, and as we begin to look deeper into 2026, abundance becomes less of a buzzword and more of a provocation. It asks whether we are willing to rethink the way schools are designed, led, and experienced. In education, scarcity has become so normalized that it often goes unnamed. We talk casually about limited time, limited seats, limited bandwidth. We accept pressure as the cost of excellence and constraint as the price of rigor. And over time, those assumptions harden into culture. Schools begin to operate as if opportunity must be rationed to retain its value, as if growth is fragile, and as if primary roles of leadership are to protect what already exists. Scarcity, it seems, has become the default logic, not because educators believe in it philosophically, but because they've inherited systems that reward it operationally. Now, one of the most visible consequences of that logic is how pressure shows up in school culture. In many high-performing environments, pressure is not by accident. It's a designed feature. It's how urgency is created. It's how standards are enforced. And for a while, at least, it works. But pressure without possibility eventually narrows the emotional and intellectual space students and adults need to grow. When everything feels high stakes, curiosity shrinks, risk-taking declines, mistakes become identity threats more than learning moments. Abundance, in contrast, does not remove challenges, but it changes the emotional economy of the institution. It allows challenge to coexist with belonging and ambition, to coexist with sustainability. Now, that cultural shift has profound implications for leadership. Scarcity-oriented leadership is often reactive by necessity. Leaders spend their days allocating limited resources, managing conflict, and enforcing constraints. Abundance, though, reframes the work. It asks leaders to think less like crisis managers and more like system designers. The central question becomes not how to survive within the constraints, but which constraints are actually necessary and which are simply inherited habits. So leadership through this lens is about reducing friction so that learning and innovation can move more freely through the organization. And I think this is where abundance becomes uncomfortable because it exposes how often schools confuse control with quality. Layers of approval, rigid schedules, tightly guarded pathways are usually justified as safeguards, and sometimes they are. But often they persist because no one has had the space or authority to redesign them. An abundance-oriented leader is willing to ask which rules were built for a different era, which processes slow progress without improving outcomes, and which assumptions about risk no longer serve students well. That work is quieter than charismatic leadership, but far, far more consequential. And I think nowhere is this shift more important than in how schools think about talent. Scarcity thinking treats excellence as something to be identified and protected. Abundance treats excellence as something to be cultivated and expanded. For decades, schools have invested enormous energy in sorting students, deciding who belongs in advanced pathways and who does not, often very early in their academic lives. Now, that approach produces impressive outcomes for some students, but it also leaves vast resources of potential underdeveloped. Abundance challenges the idea that opportunity must be rare to be meaningful. It insists that the real work of education is not selecting the best, but building systems that produce more excellence over time. For the year ahead, this may be the most important implication of all. Schools are facing mounting pressure from enrollment shifts, from mental health concerns, from public skepticism, from internal fatigue. Scarcity offers a tempting retreat. It allows institutions to become smaller, tighter, more selective, more defensive. Abundance, by contrast, offers a harder path. It requires imagination, trust, and a willingness to redesign systems that no longer match what we know about human potential. But it also offers a way forward that does not rely on grinding people down to get results. So perhaps the reason abundance gained influence in recent months is because it names something many educators were already feeling, and perhaps the reason it's worth thinking about as we settle into this new year is because it asks a question we can no longer avoid. Are our schools designed to manage limitation or to make room for growth? The answer to that question will shape not just policy or programs, but the daily experience of students and educators alike. Abundance does not promise ease. It promises something better, that our systems can finally begin to match the depth of talent already sitting in our classrooms, if we are willing to build them that way. A Slice with Dice is a production of Aldercube. Thanks for making time to reflect with me. If you're finding value in these episodes, I hope you'll subscribe and help spread the word. Until next time, lead boldly, listen closely, and keep pushing forward. I'll see you then.